we are is at a crossroads that something is coming, something is looming. And I refer to this something as the great simplification. To put it short and succinct, our work now, Marcello, is to change the initial conditions of the future.
People who want to act, who are acting for the best of the world through their economic activities.
We want the scout team of pro-social humans who are paying attention and want to play a role in our collective future to be aware of the possible scenarios. And instead of looking at what's happening right now in the media, look 2 or 3 steps ahead at what are the things that are going to need to be done.
Marcello Palazzi, I'm here on behalf of our community of For Good Leaders, as well as the B Corps and other networks that I've been involved for many years. I'm very fortunate to have Nate Hagens with us. First of all, he has been working for 20 years around defining the moment, the human predicament, he calls it, the moment that our civilization is facing this difficult juncture. And Nate, what I love about his work is that first, he's a free agent. He's not defending any interest of a university or foundation. He's a free agent. He has worked on Wall Street, MBA in finance, and a PhD in natural resources. And he's combining what I say, the world of practice, of economy, of business, with the world of science and understanding holistically where we are in the world at this difficult moment. And Nate has created an amazing series of podcasts and conversations, 163 podcasts and 75 Franklies. I must say, for me, I've learned more from these talks than I have in maybe 10 years of universities. For me, is the person who has been able to create the most holistic perspective around the economy, energy, the future. Websites, natehagens.com, thegreatsimplification.com. We can find all the talks that have been produced that I have learned so much from. So maybe, Nate, over to you now. Could you briefly share the highlights of what you've been working on, and how does this inform people in economy, in business, social entrepreneurs as well, because that's a very important part of our community. Thank you very much, Nate.
As you say, the business as usual is starting to be more obvious that it's not working. And we have arrived at what I call a species level conversation. We're the first generation of our species to be able to understand where we came from, how we got here, what we're doing, what our natural resource sink and source balance sheets are, how the parts and the processes interrelate and fit together of our human ecosystem. And we are quite simply at a rite of passage moment for our culture and our species. I think a lot of people feel that something is not working and that something is wrong. And I think it's important, without judgment, without blame, without ideology, without politics, and even without values, at least at first, to understand from an aerial view of what's going on. What are the constraints and opportunities? How did we get here? What are the fundamental drivers of the biophysical macroeconomic situation that humanity finds itself in 2025? And so my work has focused on 3 pillars. One is energy and how critical energy is in nature and how critical it is in human societies, and how energy integrates with technology, with money, with economic systems. But many people still in our culture, many people at high levels in our culture, are what I refer to as energy blind. They don't realize that our entire system is powered on a huge supplement of ancient carbon that we treat as if it were interest, but it's really a bank account that we're drawing down millions of times faster than Earth created it. We use around 100 billion barrel of oil equivalents of oil, gas, and coal, the main fossil hydrocarbons, every year in our economies. 1 barrel of oil, Marcello, as you know, does the work of around 4.5 years physical of you or me or anyone watching this. So we basically have the labor equivalent of around 4 to 500 billion human workers combined with technology that are powering our global system. This stuff, we don't include the price of the cost on ecosystems or pollution into the prices we pay. And this stuff is finite. It is declining. The relationship between energy, technology, money, and economic growth is really important. And we're growing our debt way faster than we're growing our GDP, which is the income stream needed to replace it. So energy is something that is starting to become vitally important for the future. The second category is, of course, us, the humans, human individual and human aggregate, how we relate to each other and act in groups is vitally important to understand our situation. We're an evolved species that is wildly out of context with our ancestral conditions of 150 people in close proximity in the savannas of Africa. We have cognitive biases. We're incredibly tribal and group oriented. We're focused on the present, not the future. And last but not least, and I know this is important in your groups and networks, is we have taken for granted the price and impact of our economic activities on the natural world. Climate change is a big one as we are emitting carbon, liberating carbon that was stored underground for millions and hundreds of millions of years. The impact on biodiversity and the 10 million species we share the planet with. So you talk about what's better for people and what's better for the planet. There is an intersection there, and the intersection is in the not too distant future, we're going to have to use less, not because we choose to, but because we have to. And so the fundamental story that I've put together, there is a biological metabolism at work with human society where we have self-organized by our families, by our small businesses, by corporations, by nation states to optimize profits as our main cultural goal. And those profits are tethered to energy. We need energy for every single thing that contributes to goods and services in the world economy. That energy is 85% tethered to carbon and pollution. And we just repeat that every quarter and every year, and that is the goal. And so this has become a actual metabolism, and we have outsourced our wisdom to the financial markets. And there is no one in control of the system, not billionaires, not politicians. We answer to the market. And now we've got artificial intelligence, which is a layer on top of all this, which is accelerating the demand for energy, the demand for compute, the impact on natural resources and ecosystems. Energetically, financially, and of course, ecologically, this is not sustainable. Where we are is at a crossroads that something is coming, something is looming. And I refer to this something as the great simplification. And the reason I chose that word, it's a play off of Joseph Tainer's Collapse of Complex Civilizations, where he said that humans solve problems by adding nodes and networks and adding complexity to the existing system. That complexity has a cost in terms of energy. So what we've done the last 2 centuries is built this moonshot of complexity and social organization that we have now a 6-continent just-in-time overnight supply chain based on really complex supply chains. At some point in coming decades, maybe coming years, the inverse is going to start to happen, that we're not going to be able to add more complexity to the system, and we're going to have to simplify. And that means more local and regional economies, and it means different, probably economic and other cultural institutions. The goal of my work, and which is why you and I are friends and aligned, is we want the scout team of pro-social humans who are paying attention and want to play a role in our collective future to be aware of the possible scenarios. And instead of looking at what's happening right now in the media, look 2 or 3 steps ahead at what are the things that are going to need to be done. And of course, it starts with an individual. To put it short and succinct, our work now, Marcello, is to change the initial conditions of the future.
I have 2 reflections. One is, it's what actually I called in a book I wrote 30 years ago, the civic economy, which is the economy of basic needs, what people need to live, to survive, housing, food, energy, mobility. So I think we should never forget that there's still many people in the world who don't have access to all these things that we take for granted. That is the idea of a civic economy, the Aristotelian notion of eudaimonia, that at the end, it's not about ideology, it's about actually meeting the needs of ordinary people all around the world. So saying this and combining with the next generation, I see a lot of young people doing the right things. But what you're saying is we are late in the game, and maybe even by summing up and adding all these new energy by younger people, it's not going to be enough without really addressing the system conditions, changing the system there. The second is we see there are about 200 million decision makers who sit on corporate boards around the world, medium-sized companies, social enterprises, etc., etc. There are about 200 million. Many of these people are graduates of universities. They've studied economics, law, business, etc. So one of our approaches is how do we actually get these two people to re-educate themselves? And that's also where your work is very important. I mean, I would love to be able to reach all these people with your work because it is sort of a wake-up call. But then the next question is, particularly given the situation now with government in the United States, but also in other countries, Russia and maybe India and so forth, this sort of shift towards authoritarianism, is how do we allow this collective leadership that comes from millions of people around the world to surface up in such a way that we can actually affect and influence the kind of politics that is being distorted now by some of our governments.
Historically, the antidote to authoritarianism or dark triad sort of personality dynamics is groups of humans who coordinate and combine their skills towards something that is better for the group. I mean, we are, all of us, a product of multi-level selection, but cooperative groups outcompeted selfish groups. And so all of us have both of these impulses in us. About the 200 million leaders, in my speaking and traveling, I've noticed something really interesting, that we all are kind of wearing three hats simultaneously. And the first hat is our job and our boss and our paycheck, and we have to, do the right things for that. And the second hat is we want to be a good family member and friend and mother or brother or son or grandfather or whatever. We want to do the right things for our family and our community. And the third hat is people like animals and nature generally, and we want to be good ancestors to future generations of ours and other species. We think about the future. The problem is that in our current economic system, this economic superorganism, is we are only able to behave as if that first hat is the only one. We aren't given incentives and structures to wear all three of those hats simultaneously. And so I think that's going to have to change at some point, where we can make decisions that are aligned with all three of those things. That's a lot of the work of what your network does.
Our community is 3,000 alumni, 10,000 followers, 65,000 leaders around the world, mostly entrepreneurs, impact investors, executives, and other decision makers in the economy. It's come together in the last 3 years, benefit corporations, developing the economy in a way that is good for people and planet. So there's 10,000 of these companies around the world and 20,000 by law. So the world that I represent here is the world of people who want to act, who are acting for the best of the world through their economic activities. Obviously, business as usual, the economy as usual is not working. It's created enormous problems. Externalities actually is the most, the simplest way to describe it. From my perspective of our community, we need to have all our scientific facts in order to be able to decide what the responses and the action that we can take, given that we are people of action. And I found so many amazing people doing wonderful work. Often they don't know of each other. And so this is what you call the islands of coherence. I have an old friend, Peter Hagens, the founder of Transparency International. He used to call it islands of integrity. How do you create spaces that are free of corruption, free of malpractices? And that is very similar to islands of coherence. So I think that one very concrete step is to start connecting all these islands of coherence around the world. And I think it should not be that difficult with the AI and the tools we have today. So this is something we are trying to do with a company called Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a B Corp, is work for collective intelligence. Anyway, this is the direction to go. But the real point I want to make is that the world has never had so much knowledge, never had so many educated people, never had so many resources in terms of money, but also connections. So I think there is potential. And anyway, part of our objective is how do we realize that potential by connecting and bringing together all these amazing people who really care for the world and are working every day to do something for the world. In finishing, I wanted to ask you, what are your next steps? Are there things that we could do as a community to support you? We talked yesterday about the kind of re-education of all these, well, see if we can get to 200 million, but more, we could start with 200,000 and 2 million, and all the people who basically are the decision makers in the economy. So can we do something? Can we help you to do that?
We don't need to know every last thing about our situation in order to act. We have to just kind of squint and see the general shape of the tapestry. What I'm doing now is I'm continuing to host and platform wide boundary thinkers that are looking ahead to what we face. Every Friday I have a Frankly, which is kind of an advanced take on some aspect of our situation. But the next few months I am with my team doing a 6 to 10 hour video series called Reality 101, which will be the one stop to look at the horizontal and vertical situation that we face and the various scenarios and the constraints and a what to do kind of recommendation. I no longer believe in solutions as much as I think there's going to be millions of responses that are necessary. So we're going to outline the responses, first of all, at the level of the individual. How do you live meaningful lives while playing a role in our collective future, and then to community and pro-social prepping and advanced policy, all the way up to technology, governance, and the global situation. So we're working on that. Yeah, please subscribe to The Great Simplification or the Nate Hagens YouTube channel. And I think the most important thing to do for you, the viewers, is start building and investing in social capital right now. We need to meet people in the dining car that share our values, or you just like hanging out with, or are working on something of meaning. And so what you can do is become really systemically informed about our situation, looking 2 or 3 steps ahead, and start building social networks where you live on the things you care about to avert the default path for what is currently coming our way. And the more of those networks, like you said earlier, the islands of coherence kind of spiral outwards, the more opportunities we're going to have in the future, things that might not be envisioned or even possible today.
Wonderful, Nate. Thank you very much. As I told you, our next big engagement is at Change Now in Paris at the end of April with 40,000 change makers, one of the largest gathering of change makers in the world. So we really want to kind of help to aggregate these sort of positive energies and get to the next level. And then the final couple of things on my side is that there is a lot that's going on in the world of impact investing. Particularly, there is a wonderful British gentleman, Sir Ronald Cohen, who started the GSG. It is the Global Steering Group for Impact Investing. They're raising billions of dollars or euros for investing in society. And, of course, that's not going to be the solution to this, the wider challenges that you face, that you've been explaining. But I think it is also a combination of these solutions. So impact investors, philanthropists, good business leaders. But having said so, Nate, big thanks to you and to your work. You are such an amazing, committed leader. There'll be other opportunities in the future to connect with Nate. So thanks so much, Nate. Wonderful.
Thank you, Marcello, and your work and your networks are really important. So keep doing what you're doing. When you wrote your book 30 years ago, I was still playing Donkey Kong and watching Gilligan's Island's reruns on TV. So you've been way ahead of your time, and it's really important.